Hello everyone, this is part 25 of What If Naruto Had Some Help, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. When Anko reappeared, she was surrounded by 20 men, each with kunai ready, and she frowned, and one of the men, who was wearing a Junin outfit, said, "Hello, Anko. Been a long time." Anko looked at the man and said, "Sure has, Oren. So tell me, how did you know where I was going to appear?" Oren said, "We have seals that detect chakra use in the tunnel, and so when you shushined out of them, we activated the other security seals which brought you here. Now please surrender and let's go see Mr. Paikao," as he motioned for her to move. Anko sighed as she put her arms up and began to be led away. Naruto, after he sent Anko with the girl, started following the man who he bought the girl off of, and soon came to a stone building that looked like a hotel. The man turned and said, "All right, this is the place." Naruto nods and said, "Good." And he clenched his fist as blood covered his hand and the seed, and as it started to grow, Naruto quickly spun around and the rose whip wrapped around the guy and he screamed, "Hey!" as he was tied up, and Naruto grabbed some of the man's shirt, spinning it off and shoved it in the man's mouth and said, "Don't go anywhere. I have business with you later. Come." As he began to walk toward the door to the hotel. As the girls walked by, they shot glares at the man, and Naruto walked up to the door and opened it, and two guards on the other side of the door quickly used a pike each to cross in front of Naruto, who said, "I have come to talk to Ken Paikao. My name is Naruto Namikaze. I am taking over Crystal Finger Rose operation and would like to meet one of the only bosses larger than her. Now either you move the F out of my way or I will K you both." A voice from the other side of the room said, "My, quite a little spitfire we have here. So that B Rose has finally learned this isn't a world for a woman, huh?" Naruto saw both men had yet to move, and he quickly spun and ducked, nailing both in the nuts before pulling out a pair of kunai and holding them at their NS, and he said, "Now let me pass, or do you want to S?" The man at the other end said, "Let him pass. I like his style." Both men, who were now holding themselves, moved their pikes out of the way, and Naruto walked in with the girls behind him, and each paled a little as they saw around 30 women in the room, all enchained to the walls and to the chair the man was sitting on. There was two men standing guard against the wall and another in front of the guy in the chair, but this man was doing a line of crack. Naruto said, "I take it you're Ken." Ken nods and motioned for the chair across from him and said, "Sit and enjoy my hospitality, boy. I see you have an eye for the F," as he eyed each of the girls and then on Zabuza. Naruto saw his eye and said, "Zabuza Momoki, my personal bodyguard, and the girls are a gift from my lover. You've heard of Anko Mitarashi?" Ken said, "Ah, the famous snake whore of Konoha. Yeah, I heard of her." Naruto said, "Yeah, that's her. She got tired of that place always giving her crap for her old sensei, and with a little persuasion helped me to capture these girls." Ken said, "Really? I heard that you left with all the rookie genin of your class." Naruto said, "Yeah, we did, but it was a setup. I got two back in the tunnels as guards in case anyone from Konoha decides to follow. Shikamaru Nara, my right-hand man, and Sasuke Uchiha. The prick is following me, claiming me to be like a stepbrother, but I know he plans to sell me out and K me once he learns all my tricks. I would K him, but the boy is worth a lot of money and power to me for the time being, to the right parties. I am sure you have an idea of who I speak of." As a slave girl walked over and she got on her knees in front of Naruto and began to unbutton his pants. Ino was about to do something until she felt Zabuza's hand on her shoulder. Ken saw this and Naruto motioned with his head, and Miko began to walk over toward Ken, and Naruto said, "I don't want to owe you something later that might cost me too much, so I will have Miko here return the favor," as he felt the girl begin to rub him through his boxes. Ken said, "A man after my own heart, so tell me about the other genin that were with you as well as the sensei." Naruto smirked and said, "Having Anko as my lover comes in handy with her expert knowledge of poisons. Slipped it in the fish we caught and they went to sleep and never woke up. The girls here were all given mild sedatives so they wouldn't wake up before we were in more appropriate conditions." Ken smirked and asked, "So where is your whore?" Naruto said, "She should be returning shortly. My eye caught another little beauty on my way in I wanted for my collection and had her take the girl back to the two in the cave. Just then the door to the room opened and Anko was being led inside by Oren and his security men. Ken said, speak of the bee. Here she is now. So, as an explosion happened right between his legs blowing his manhood off. Miko turned to water from the explosion and Naruto appeared behind the man doing crack driving his skull down onto the crack pipe driving it into his brain killing him before he turned and threw a kunai to the right wall near the man who started to move and he appeared in a yellow flash beside the man already gathering chakra in his hand and he screamed, Rasengan, as he slammed the Rasengan into the man's chest sending him into the wall. The other man who was against the left wall began to move as well but Zabuza swung his sword taking the man's head off. The two men who had pikes began to charge when Haku began making one-hand seals and slammed her foot into the water that used to be Miko and said, 1,000 needles of death, as the needles appeared above the two men and drove into them making them scream out as they fell to the ground. In less than 3 seconds 3 men were two severely wounded, and Ken was bleeding severely with his new change and the men who were with Oren all went up in smoke. Anko who had begun to move when the explosion hit was beginning to make hand signs when Naruto screamed, Stop Anko. Anko stopped and looked at Oren and then at Naruto and asked, What the hell's going on Gaki? Oren walked over and espered a kunai into Ken's head and shoved the man on the ground as he turned and Naruto asked, Good enough. Oren looked at Naruto and said, Yeah Naruto-sama. I guess that was good enough. Rose sent word to me that you would be coming this way. With Ken's I will take over the operation here in the underworld city and reroute everything to your operations that was in Ken's operations. Just then Kakashi, Asuma, Kurenai, Shikamaru, Neji, Sasuke, and Guy all barged into the room following Shino and all were ready to fight and Kakashi pulled down his hayate and said, What happened? Everyone looked at Naruto who said, Allow me to introduce my information broker. As you all know already Tenten family is my main weapon supplier. In Konoha I had another information broker who will remain nameless but could give me some info of things classified in the village but I needed a new one with what was going on. Oren here has been a mole my sister planted in Ken operation 3 years back from what I heard but his cover been blown recently so Ken was making plans to eliminate him so in return for us taking out Ken, Oren here will take over operations here and be able to give us more info and also some supplies. Now you got my info. Oren pulled out a scroll and opened it and said, Yeah. According to the info I got Orochimaru has formed a secret alliance with Suna and plans to use the exams finals to launch a surprise attack from the outside of the village while the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi is to release his demon in the stadium. Everyone was stunned except Naruto and Anko caught the look Naruto had and said, You knew this. Naruto said, Partly. I knew about Orochimaru planning to attack the village during the exams but I didn't know about Suna or the Ichibi. What you got on the Jinchuriki? Oren said, Sabaku no Gaara is the youngest son of the Yondaime Kazekage. He has 2 siblings, Temari who is the eldest and Kankuro. Temari is fan user and Kankuro is a puppet user. Gaara has thanks to the demon mastery over sand but has no taijutsu or any other skills to speak of. Their Junin sensei is named Baki, second strongest person in the village under the Kazekage. Naruto pulled out the journal of Mirai and wrote in it and said, You got any pictures of them? Oren smirked and said, You expect any less, as he handed the pictures to Naruto. Naruto looked at them and passed them around and said, Remember them. We're going to be seeing them soon. So what do you have on Orochimaru besides having an alliance with Suna? Oren pulled out a second scroll and opened it and said, Orochimaru is the Otokage of the Hidden Sound village north of the Valley of the End. Unlike other hidden villages, Sound is actually divided into 20 smaller bases. There are no civilians in the bases. He's buying bloodlines and slaves for experimentations and SS pretty regularly. I say 30% of all the slaves who come through here go to him. Naruto said, That's going to change. How hard would it be to spread word to all the slave traders in the city about a business opportunity? Oren asked, Depends on how big and how dangerous. Naruto said, 100% guarantee of buying all slaves at wholesale price of $10,000 for 30 slaves. All the Konoha people were looking at Naruto in shock and Oren said, I can arrange that no problem but you got the cash to pull that off and where you want them. Naruto said, Cash is not the option. I got a financial backer who got more money than all 5 hidden villages put together. As for the location, Whirlpool Country also spread word that bloodlines from the land of Mr. Preferred greatly and will be paid $15,000 for every 30 they can get. Whole families will be worth $20,000. All delivered to Whirlpool. I will also buy all the slaves that are in the city now at those prices. Payment on delivery. Oren said, I can get on it right away. Anything else? Naruto looked around and said, yeah, I need you to put something in the bingo books in all the hidden villages. You think you can do that? Oren smirked and nods, and Naruto pulled out a scroll and began to write on it, and he said, here, this is everything we know on Madara Uchiha and Akatsuki. By putting this in all the bingo books it will make him moving in the shadows harder. Oren read it and said, so he's the Mizukage. Asuma asked, Naruto, what aren't you telling us? I mean we. Naruto sighed and said, interrupting him, it's 2 days travel from here to Whirlpool. We are supposed to meet the other flames there. When you meet them you will understand exactly why I can't say anything right now. Please just trust me for 2 more days. Kakashi said, very well Naruto, 2 days, but then you got to tell us everything. None of us like the idea of slave trading. Naruto nods and looks at Oren and said, none of this happened. You decided to get greedy and ked Ken after I met with him. Got it? Oren nods and said, yeah, I got it, but stay away till the smoke settles from this or it will cause trouble. Naruto said, very well. Let's go everyone, where's Choji and that girl? Everyone looked around and Shikamaru said, troublesome. He's still with her outside of the cave. Naruto sighed and said, then come on. We got 2 long days ahead of us. As he exited the building, subbing the man in the end he tied up earlier, and then walked out the cave with the others following him. When they made it outside they found Choji feeding the girl, who looked scared when they all walked out of the cave, and Choji said in a quiet voice, relax. These are my friends Amy. Naruto walked over and said, I'm Naruto, who are you? The girl looked at Naruto and then at Choji, and Choji nods and said, her name's Amy, she's from the land of water. Her family are all S and she was captured and sold as a slave. The man you bought her from was the 10th person she been sold to in the last 6 months. Naruto looked at her in the eyes and he grabbed his head and screamed, stop, as he flew backwards several feet, falling to the floor. Everyone was shocked and tried to figure out what happened when Naruto was covered in smoke and he was replaced with Miko, who looked around and said, well, that was exciting. Ino asked, what happened Naruto? Miko said, I'm not Naruto. I'm Miko Ino. Remember, MPD. As for what happened, the girl is sort of like your family in the way. When she looked into his eyes she brought up some painful memories. He couldn't take it and went into shock, so he's passed out right now in his mind. I took over since I seemed to be the only one of his personalities that were not hit when she did it. Choji said, sorry about that. It happened to me also. She can't talk normally. She has to look at you and she's able to speak with her mind, but if you're not expecting her to do it then it's like breaking into someone's mind. She literally breaks in, but she has to make eye contact. Right. As he looked at her. After a few seconds Choji turned and said, she says she's sorry for hurting Naruto. When she tried to talk to him she didn't know he had multiple minds in his head, and when she tried to talk they all linked together. Miko said, except me. I've always been separated from the others for some reason. Kakashi sighed and said, can she travel Choji? Choji looked at Amy and said, she says her ankle's broke. I can carry her if you all want me to. Kakashi said, yeah, that might be best. Miko, do you know where Whirlpool is? Miko said, normally I would, but all Naruto information is sort of screwed up at the moment. It's like he went Kijbunshin happy on the public library. Guy said, looks like we were right about his mind then Kakashi. Kakashi nods and said, alright, Choji, carry Amy was it? Okay, carry her for now. I know the way to Whirlpool. As he began to move away, Choji picked up Amy bridal style and began to follow Kakashi along with everyone else. It took 2 days to get to Whirlpool with Kakashi leading. In that time Miko has been in control of Naruto's body, as his other personalities were all still screwed up and in mental pain. Ino looked worriedly at her boyfriend and thought, I wish Dad was here. I don't know enough to try and help him. As the group got to a hill that overlooked the valley where the village of Whirlpool once stood, Kakashi eyes widened and said, well, there's a surprise. Asuma asked, what? Kakashi said, the village has been rebuilt and there are people here already. Did you know about this, Miko? Miko frowned as she tried to concentrate and said, Rose has been funding this along with the other Black Flames who are down there waiting for us. I can't be sure of much else, but I do know they will come meet us when we get there. Kurenai said, I suppose then we should get going then. Everyone nods and began to take the road down to the village. When they got there, Asuma asked, Sir, any idea who it is we are supposed to meet? A puff of smoke appeared in the road and a voice said, I am the man who is loved in the north, south, east, and west, the man all men want to be and all women want to be with. I am the great Jiraiya. As the smoke cleared and Jiraiya was seen standing there shocking everyone. Sakura said, the thought on everyone's mind, what the hell? Kakashi said, you're who we are supposed to meet, Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya looked at Miko and frowned and said, drop the disguise, kid. Miko said, I would if I could, but something happened and Nii-san is sort of knocked out mentally right now and we can't figure out how to wake him. Jiraiya frowned and looked at Kakashi and said, what happened to him, Kakashi? Kakashi said, well, we ran into this girl here who has a bloodline that allows her to enter people's minds through eye contact and she's not able to speak, so when she tried to send her words to Naruto he sort of screamed out and Miko got control of his body and been in charge ever since. Jiraiya said, I see, follow me and we will see if Tsunade can help him. Tenten eyes widened and said, Tsunade-sama also a member of the Black Flames, as each of the genins were wide-eyed. Jiraiya turned to her and then glanced around and said, we will discuss that back at the building we have for our base. Follow me, as he began to lead him through the street. It took 10 minutes to reach what looked like an apartment complex and Jiraiya walked in and as the others did, two men stepped forward and one said, halt, who goes there? Jiraiya said, crystal rubies. The two men stepped back and Jiraiya motioned for everyone to follow them. They soon came to a large conference room with couches, chairs, and tables around it and Tenten said, Tsunade-sama, in awe as she saw Tsunade and Shizune. Tsunade looked at Jiraiya and said, so now that this group is here, what did you drag me here for, Jiraiya? Jiraiya said, first I need you to check the girl here. She's really Naruto Uzumaki and he suffered a form of mental attack thanks to that girl's bloodline and one of his alias have taken over his body and claims the real him is knocked out. Once he recovered we can get down to business. Tsunade frowned and walked over to Miko and she placed her glowing green hand against Miko's head and closed her eyes in concentration and said, Kid uses Kijbunshin a lot, doesn't he? As she looked at the others in the room. Kakashi said, yes. Tsunade sighed and said, idiot. The Kijbunshin no jutsu wasn't classified a kinjutsu because of the chakra danger or the mental backlash problem. It was classified a kinjutsu because of the fact it causes brain tumors. Do they know about his healing ability? Sasuke said, if you're talking about QB then we all know. Tsunade said, I see. Yeah, the QB most likely helped to keep this problem from surfacing by replacing the damaged cells in his brain, but his body still had the old tumors still there, and when whatever that girl's bloodline did, it shoved QB chakra out of those areas and shoved her own into his brain, so she's locked QB out from repairing the damage caused. To fix this he needs to have the tumors removed and QB chakra released into his body more than usual to repair the damage. Miko said, that might be a problem. Nii-san basically told QB to kiss his blonde ass, and after what happened with the Sanbi I doubt Nii-san would want any of QB chakra in his system as well. Couldn't you just repair the damage yourself like we were just any normal human? Tsunade frowned and said, I guess I can, but there's not as much of a chance the surgery would be successful if I was even willing to do the surgery in the first place. Jiraiya said, I'll pay off all of your debts if you do it. We need his help badly. Tsunade looked at Jiraiya and then at Miko and said, alright, but I expect all my debts paid, Jiraiya. Jiraiya nods and Tsunade said, Shizune, take this person to one of the other rooms and prep for surgery. Shizune said, yes Tsunade-sama. Come with me please, as she grabbed Miko's hand and led her away. After they were gone she asked, so what's going on? Zabuza, seeing everyone trying to figure out what to say, said, well, I guess the best place to start would be with what we found out, as he began to explain what they found out. Once he was done, Jiraiya said, Sir Orochimaru has got Suna to join him in planning to attack Konoha, and the kids got bloodline refugees coming here using slave traders to get them here. Damn kid, this is going to cost me a fortune. Kakashi asked, what exactly is going on, Jiraiya-sama? Naruto wasn't very informative, afraid that we may be spied on. Jiraiya looked at Sasuke and said, I'm sure the kids mentioned some of it, but could you tell me what you know about Madara Uchiha and Akatsuki? As Jiraiya heard the info they knew about Akatsuki and Madara Uchiha, he whistled and said, Damn Gaki. I knew you had a lot of info, but not that much. Some of the things even I hadn't gotten proof of yet. But you all got enough info to find out about what's going on. What we have gathered is Madara Uchiha is trying to orchestrate the Fourth Great Shinobi War, and he plans to use the Biju in place of his armies. From what we know, Madara has been trying to systematically weaken each of the hidden villages for the last 50 years, from the Bloodline Civil War in the Mist, to the disappearance of the Sandaime Kozekage, funding of the Hidden Sound Village, the Kyuubi attack on Konoha, as well as half a dozen other events that either caused unrest between each of the nations or weakening them. All the people you saw walking outside are in fact spies in my spy network I called here, though there is a chance that some of them may or may not have been compromised, which is why I am so thankful to the idea of an alternative to make this place look like a normal village. What we are basically doing is starting our own village with the sole purpose of eliminating threats to Konoha while targeting Madara Uchiha and the Akatsuki. Officially this will be the Hidden Whirlpool Village, but unofficially the Black Flames will use this as our headquarters, and the Razenkage is in fact nothing more than a political puppet who answers to us directly, keeping us hidden from the public eye as best as possible. All of you, I assume, realize that as of this moment that you are most likely going to be classified as traitors and criminals to Konoha. Do you all understand that? Kiba said, yeah. Naruto basically told us that what we were doing couldn't be linked back to Konoha and we were totally black ops and gave us the option of backing out. Jiraiya said, good. Then you each need to train hard, because even though you are all officially ranked genin, you will most likely be fighting Junin or higher ranked enemies soon. Officially I'm not here. I have no connection to you, but soon you and Shizune will both have to become traitors to Konoha. Unofficially you will be the leader of the Black Flames as your way of trying to get revenge on Konoha for the deaths and betrayal of your family. Tsunade frowned and asked, why should I do that, and what do you mean unofficially? Jiraiya said, the Black Flames are the criminal organization that is replacing Crystal Finger's Rose operation. Naruto is her chosen successor, and basically the one most of the criminal contacts as well as those in this room will follow, because they either been ordered to or he has earned their trust. You are unofficial as you have the experience and skills to help him when there comes situation he isn't able to handle himself, as well as being a heavy hitter should they need it. I have spoken with the Toads and they have agreed to lie and claim they chose to honor the Yondaime and offered Naruto a contract with them behind my back, and if I am forced to summon them they will declare they will follow his orders before they will follow mine, because Konoha lost their respect for the way they treated him. Naruto will still have to prove himself to Gambunta though. If any of you have summoning contracts then you should contact them and inform them. Speaking of, how many of you actually do have contracts? Asuma said, I have monkeys. Hinata said, falcons. Surprising everyone, and Neji asked, how? I thought that we were not allowed to sign contracts. Hinata said, it belonged to my mother. Guy said, turtles. Kakashi said, dogs. Sasuke frowned and said, I have ravens since Itachi S and I can get another, but I won't be able to sign it since I want ravens. Jiraiya asked, what is it? Sasuke said, cats. Ino frowned and said, can anyone sign that contract, or does it have to be an Uchiha? Sasuke said, I don't really know. I would have to ask the cat lady at the old Uchiha city. Tsunade said, the one your clan had during the clan wars. Sasuke nods and Tsunade said, I see. I'm surprised that nobody tried to get that one yet. Anko said, well, I got snakes. Kurenai sighed and said, this sucks. I'm the only Junin here who doesn't have a contract. Jiraiya said, not yet. Kurenai asked, what do you mean not yet? Jiraiya pulled out a scroll and unsealed several other scrolls and said, these are list of known contracts and who has them, as well as which ones currently doesn't have summoners. When the kid is able I am going to get him to have those that are free, liberated from wherever they are. A voice from behind them said, no, we're going to have my men steal them for us, causing everyone to turn and see Naruto standing there, but he looked weak, and Shizune next to him, and Tsunade said, that was too quick. What happened? Shizune looked at Naruto and said, the girl's chakra was the problem. As soon as I removed it from his brain to sedate him he reverted back to normal. Naruto frowned and said, almost normal. I'm afraid my brain sort of fused my other personalities together, so I am sort of the doctor and my other personality as well as myself. Tsunade asked, the doctor, looking confused. Anko said, it's the personality he had that took over when he had to do tea and interrogations. I'm damn proud of him. Naruto rubbed his head and said, so did I miss anything? I assume we're in Whirlpool. Ino said, yeah, we are. Jiraiya said, it's good to see you again, Naruto. Naruto said, good to see you also, Ero-sanin, causing the older nins to snicker and the genin to look shocked. Jiraiya said, you ever going to stop calling me that? Naruto said, are you ever going to quit peeking on women? Thought so. So did the toads agree? Jiraiya said, yes, but Gambunta wants to test you to make sure you are worthy. Naruto nods as he walked over and sat down and asked, anything else I should know about? Kakashi said, Tsunade will be the unofficial leader of the Black Flame so she can help you when you need someone with more experience. Naruto looked at her and said, plus if we need a medic since we won't be able to go to most places for help as well as the fact she's a heavy hitter, right? Especially since we will be fighting Orochimaru and Madara Uchiha at some point, as he looked at Jiraiya. Jiraiya said, yeah. Naruto asked, I assume you are okay with this situation or are we still discussing terms, as he turned to Tsunade. Tsunade said, I haven't agreed to anything. Naruto smirked and said, I assumed as much, here, as he pulled out a scroll and held it up. Tsunade looked at the scroll and asked, what's that? Naruto said, you're aware that Orochimaru was doing experiments on the Shodaime bloodline from what I am told. Are you aware of how he got a sample of it? Tsunade frowned as she took the scroll and began to read it and her eyes widened and said, that bastard. I'll K him. Jiraiya asked, what's wrong, Haim? What's in the scroll? Tsunade handed Jiraiya the scroll and his eyes widened at what he read and said, impossible, why didn't Sensei ever inform us about this? Naruto said, Gigi was holding it in case there ever came a time when he had no choice but to call Tsunade back to active duty. He didn't want her to feel pain and suffering over what happened any more than she already had, so he kept it quiet until now. Ino, being the curious one she is, asked, what is it? Tsunade closed her eyes and said, while I didn't have my grandfather's bloodline, I did carry the genes for it. A few months after my fiancé death I found out I was pregnant. I miscarried though. Orochimaru, he got the sample from. I can't say it. Naruto said, I think we all know what you're saying, Tsunade. I know this is low of me to use this info like this, but we need your help desperately. Even if it is only long enough to deal with Orochimaru. He's got an entire village and an ally with Suna to protect himself if you tried to go after him yourself, and while you are very strong and scared, eventually the numbers would overwhelm you and Orochimaru could finish you off or you would be killed before you even got to him, as he got up and placed his hand on her shoulder. Tsunade, who was glaring at the scroll, said, I want him myself. I'll help as long as I get to be the one who takes him out. Naruto frowned and said, only if you allow Anko to be your backup. She's been hurt by him as much as you have and deserves a chance to take a limb or two. Tsunade frowned and said, fine, what do you need me to do? Naruto smirked and said, I want you to train us all to be at least good enough to be field medics, and should any of us excel in the area of medicine you take those for additional training. Likewise, I want Anko to verse each of us on poisons and counters. Kerr and I will help make sure we can at least detect and dispel any genjutsu we encounter, and Guy will work with us on our taijutsu to make sure we each have a good enough skill set with taijutsu to take down Chunin at least. Kakashi Sensei will work with us on our elemental affinities, giving us several offensive and defensive jutsu, and Asuma will work on strategy and Zabuza will be kenjutsu. I know you're not going to be here much, Ero-sanin, but I want you to at least write us up some scrolls on seals where we can each make exploding tags, storage seals, blood seals, and privacy seals. I also want any you have on chakra suppression seals, especially if you have any dealing with Biju or Jinchuriki. If we have to stop Madara, we will hunt down and K all the Jinchurikis, making everyone wide-eyed. Jiraiya frowned and said, when you say all. Naruto said, I mean even myself. I want you to teach the others how to take me down should the need ever arises. I won't follow the same path Mirai did. While this is all going on, I will be getting in contact with a few of my contacts and have them setting us up with supply lines to equipment and intel as well as funding. Zabuza, I need to know if you have any contacts in the underworld or any favors out there that might be useful. We have a little less than 2 months to get ready before we make our first move. Anko asked, and what exactly is our first move, Gaki? Naruto said, the 3 Sunanins will not make it to Konoha for the Chunin exams. We're going to stop them from reaching Konoha and we will make it appear as if Akatsuki is involved in their either caping or assassination depending on if we can capture them alive. Kiba said, man, I know that we're supposed to be criminals and we're trying to protect Konoha, but why are we targeting them? Naruto said, Gaara's supposed to be the trump card to use during the exams. Without him, Suna will spend the time they have trying to locate their weapon instead of preparing to attack Konoha. Of course, Suna will try to claim that Konoha was involved, which means we have to either take out the Junin enough where he can report it was Akatsuki, or K the Junin and leave one of the other Genins so they can report the attackers were wearing black cloaks with red clouds on them, which will draw attention to Madara, but either case Gaara has to be stopped from reaching the village. Jiraiya said, I like it, except what are you going to do with him when you capture him? Naruto looked at Zabuza and said, Mirai Island. Zabuza said, should work. He had demon suppression seals all over the island to weaken Sanbi, so holding him there should be no problem and there are plenty of food and water for him. Naruto said, and it's isolated enough to make discovering him hard. Jiraiya said, I'll find out when they are coming to Konoha so you can set up an ambush as well as any information I can on him and his teammates. Ino asked, what about after that, what are we going to do? Naruto thought a moment and said, if I can get my contacts to in the black market, I would like to make things hostile between Sound and some of the other villages around Rice Field Country, so that way the leaders of those villages will want to send a message to them. If we can frame them for some attacks on their villages, we can get them to maybe eliminate the Sound team in the exams. It's too risky for Gigi to do it since there may be spies in Konoha. Kiba said, man, how the hell are you coming up with this crap? I mean, most of us can see where you're going with them, but I never thought I would hear this kind of things coming from you. Naruto said, I just think of it like my pranks back in the village. Divert village security one way while I go another, set up traps to slow down the guys chasing me so I can go down a manhole in the alley a block up. I've been doing this kind of planning for years. Just now, instead of pranking, I'm trying to remove power and support from our enemies like I would village security. Shikamaru, who had assumed a thinking pose, asked, is there any way to get a copy of Orochimaru handwriting? Tsunade said, yeah, just getting some of his old mission files. Why? Shikamaru said, Dad told me about how the Sharingan can allow a Sharingan user to copy and write just like someone else. I was thinking if we got Sasuke a copy of Orochimaru handwriting, we could have him ask for a meeting between him and the leaders of some of the minor countries that might be willing to join him and then set a trap for them. Possibly send one of Naruto Kijibunshin disguised as a Sound Nin to meet the Tsuchikage or Reikage with a letter from Orochimaru ordering them to aid in attacking Konoha while being disrespectful, and then when they refuse have the clone ignite exploding tags on it. Or have Ino take possession of a Sound Nin and place the tags on the guy's body where when Ino releases her jutsu there is a short delay before he explodes. Attempting to K the leader of another country would really make trouble for him in gaining allies in the future. Naruto thought and said, or, we could frame Orochimaru for the caping of Gaara. Or the attempted caping of Gaara. If Sound Nins were to attack the Suna Nins on their way to Suna, perhaps we could make it where they found a scroll with Orochimaru orders to K them and capture the Ichibi. That would be easier than framing Akatsuki. Maybe make it where the great Jiraiya showed up and the Sound Nins ran after the first battle. I could use my Kijibunshin to appear as Sound Nins and they could run or shushin away when Jiraiya appears, and Jiraiya along with a couple of Anbu ninja from Konoha could have knocked the body of AS Sound Nin into the area who appears to be the Junin in charge of the operation, so after the other fled he could search the body and as the Anbu searched for them and bring back a couple other boss who look like the Kijibunshin who fled. Say you were on your way to Suna because you had received intel that Orochimaru was going to assassinate the Kazekage. With you intel and the scroll you found giving orders to capture Gaara, then you could dismiss the Anbu and ask to escort the Suna Nins back to Suna to inform them of the attempt to K Gaara as well as the info you received on Orochimaru plans to assassinate the Kazekage. The Junin sensei would most likely think it better to return to the safety of their village with this information then continue to Konoha. If that fails, then we go with the backup plan of framing the Akatsuki and make it sound like they had joined forces with Orochimaru to capture the Ichibi. Shikamaru said, there are still a few ideas we would have to work out, like who would impersonate the Anbu, and who would be members of Akatsuki. But that does seem like the best idea. Naruto said, I agree, think you can fake some intel to make it look like Orochimaru plans to kill the Kazekage. Jiraiya said, if you can find out when they plan to meet for the final discussion about the invasion, then I should have no problem. Naruto nods and said, well, if that is all, I think we should get some rest and start first thing in the morning with our training. Anyone else have anything to say? Nobody said anything, and Naruto said, dismissed. Kakashi said, I almost feel like I was back in the Yondaim's office. Jiraiya said, you weren't the only one, Kakashi, you weren't the only one, as he glanced at Tsunade, who was watching Naruto as he left the room. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.